here we are, looking at Advent through the eyes of the wise men, the Magi. Why would we start at the end of the story, first off, right? I mean, why would we do that? I know. Well, here's why. We got to get to supper. Interesting that you say that, Miles, because I know that's sort of a time issue, but here's the thing, all right? I love this stuff. I dig this stuff. And I told Ralph that I was going to warn everybody, okay? I'm going to make this as concise and as hopefully useful and meaningful, but when you get into the history side of this sort of stuff, you know, it just stirs inside of me, and I love this stuff. So I'm going to try to make this useful and condense it down. But if you want to have coffee this week and talk about it more, sign me up. Okay? Sign me up. I'd love to do that because this is awesome, awesome stuff. Okay. We're starting at the end because I have the power to do that, because I get to make those calls. Because it goes so perfectly with the series that we just came out of. One God, one plan, one you. And now here we see in the New Testament, God's one plan, His one way, Jesus Christ. And we see once again that from Genesis to Revelations, God has one amazing plan. And that plan happened through that we get to see, Matthew tells us, through the eyes of the wise men. So the question comes, who are they? Who are the wise men? And I'm not going to get into the song. It's a fine song, okay? We've done that part before. Okay, it's a fine song. It has beautiful words in it, just not accurate, that's all. Okay, so who were they? They came from the east. I mean, let's read specifically. What do we know from Matthew? I mean, he really lays it out here for us. We know exactly a lot about these guys, right? He lays it out here. Where is the King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. That's about what we know. Okay? The wise men were from the east. That's about what we know about them. So why would this matter? And it's a fun story. And in the nativity scene, we have the camels, and we have them dressed in fancy things, and they were a part of Christmas without question. But why are they a part of Christmas? How did they know where to come? How did they know what stars meant? How did they know any of this stuff? See, I'm a trunk of the tree guy. You hear that every week. I know that. But I'm a trunk of the tree guy, so I want to know why. Don't just tell me that it happened. I want to know why. Where did it come from? Get to the trunk of the tree. And so, you know, we did some research, and we looked at what exactly is so important that Matthew would include this part. None of the other Gospels did, but Matthew would include this part. Who were these wise men? And to get there, you need to know that there's been in the ancient world, there was 4 different kingdoms that ruled the world, the known world. The first was the Babylonians. Okay, you've probably heard of them before, right? The Babylonians. They ruled first. And then came the Medes and the Persians. Okay, they took over from the Babylonians, the Medes and the Persians, and then came a guy by the name of Alexander the Great. Have you heard of him? Most of us have. Okay, that was the Greeks. Okay, so then Greece ruled, right, for a period of time, and then obviously at this period, when this was written, it was Roman control. The Romans dominated this time. Now here's the interesting part, or I think it's interesting, that through all of this time, from the beginning to the end of this domination, there was a group of people who were held in very high regard. And they were known as the Magi. Now, who were the Magi? They were the priestly line of the Medes. Okay? So the second dominators were the Persians and the Medes. They did it together. Now, before that, so Babylonia, right, they were still held in high regard because they were smart. They were very well educated. They sort of had a way to know things, be very intuition that people didn't normally have. And so even the rulers of Babylonia held them in very high regard. We know this from Daniel, among other places, but specifically among Daniel and other historians that have recorded things throughout history. Daniel tells us, or we read in Daniel, that whenever the king had a problem, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that nobody could tell him what it meant. And so they called in these wise men. Who were his wise men? They were magi. They were the priestly line of the Medes. Now that should make sense to us. We know we have a priestly line of the children of Israel, right? That's the Levites. And so it's a very similar thing. The priestly line is the Levites. The priestly line for the Medes is the Magi. So he calls in the Magi. You tell me my dream. And they said, well, you tell me your dream and we'll tell you what it means. He said, no, I don't want you guessing. I want you to tell me what my dream was and then tell me what it means. And they said, nobody can do that. There's not a person on earth, essentially, this is kind of Timmy's version, but in Daniel chapter 2, they said, there's nobody on earth that can do that except for God, and God doesn't walk with us. Okay? How cool is that that ties into the Christmas story? Nobody can do that but God, and God doesn't dwell among men. And then they call in Daniel, this Hebrew boy. And if you remember the story of Daniel, the Babylonians conquered the Israelites, and they took some of the Hebrew boys, the finest, the best looking, the best athletes, the best of everything, and they took them to Babylon to teach them and to train them in the way. Well, Daniel was one of those guys, along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so the king was ticked at his wise men, the Magi, and he says, okay, I'm just going to kill y'all. If you can't tell me, if you're not that smart, and I hold you in this high regard, and you aren't going to do your job, I'm going to eliminate you. What a good guy, huh? And so Daniel gets word of this, that he's going to kill all the Magi. And Daniel, who was working as a smart man with the Magi, said, well, wait a second, king, can I take a shot at this thing? And anybody who does this, if you're going to do something huge for the kingdom, Joshua, if you're going to do something huge for the kingdom, the best thing you can do is get your table around you to pray with you, right? And that's exactly what he did. He said, Daniel was like, okay, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I need some help here. I need you to pray with me that we do the right thing here, because God's going to make a move, and I need to know that what this dream is. And so they get praying with him. He walks in. He tells the king not only the meaning of his dream, but he tells him the dream itself. And if you don't believe me, you can read Daniel 2. And all of a sudden, what does Daniel get? Daniel gets promoted to the chief of the wise men, the chief, and put over charge of the Magi. And so here's this group that's held in high regard all across all of these dominators, right, of the known world. And now you have Daniel, who is able to train them at this point in time, and he trains them in what? The Old Testament, right? He trains them in what he knows to be true about the one true God, one plan, one you. He teaches them that. And so here, next generation, guess what? They had some different things. You know, Magi, they were both astronomers and astrologers. Astronomy is simply science, tracking the stars and looking at it. Astrology is not. Astrology and astronomy are not the same thing. One is superstition, basically, and the other one is true, that you can see the stars go, and they dealt in both of it. And then they saw, through the training of Daniel, what does this mean? And so they learned to read the stars and what that means and what that would mean in the kingdom and what that would look like in the Old Testament. So move that ahead to the next ones, to the Greeks. Guess who is still held in high regard? The Magi. Move that on to the Romans. Guess who is still held in high regard? The Magi. But here's the thing. I was going to do this by a slide, and then I decided that my fancy artwork would probably be better. So here we go. Over here on the east, Well, I'm going to flip it around here, okay? I'm going to say that this is the Roman world, and this is the Mediterranean Sea, okay? I should have done it the other way. This will be the Mediterranean Sea. All right, this is the Roman world, okay? And they own all of this. They dominate everything around the Mediterranean Sea. And then, this isn't great geography. This is why I didn't use just the plain map up there. But this illustrates the point very well, or I think it illustrates the point very well. They own all of this stuff. All these little countries, those cities. And then over here, you have the Parthian empires. Have you ever heard of that? Of course we have, right? Y'all are history nuts. You love this stuff. I know as much as I do. I can tell. Okay. Yeah, so the Parthian empire is over here. And this is not exactly what the geography looks like, okay? That's the point. That's why I'm doing this. But somewhere in between here is this itty-bitty little piece called Israel. You have this king, these great dominators here, and you have the powers of the east and the powers of the west, and in between here is Israel. Now we know at this time that it's under Roman control. Right? So the Romans control this, but it's still Israel. Now, King Herod was called King of the Jews because his daddy was in Jerusalem and ruled Jerusalem, and they said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you everybody outside of that and let you say that you're King of the Jews. So you keep the Jews under control in all these little towns that nobody really wants to deal with. So you be King of the Jews. And so Herod was the King of the Jews. And he liked that title. He liked the control that he had from that. Let's continue on now. Does that make sense? Okay, so powerful over here, insignificant, teeny little shred. Now when you think about this, he works for the Romans. He's king here. All of a sudden the Magi, right, are over here, and they are, listen to this, king selectors. That's what they do over here. That's their job. They're wise. They read the stars. They look at all this stuff, and they pick the next king. That's their job. So as they're going about trying to pick the next king, they're growing in power, and their king is a dud. This is history speaking. Their king is not a good leader. But they're growing in power anyway. And they're saying, we can take Rome. This is the time that we can do this. We can take Rome. We just need a new king. We need a king that's powerful and a great leader. We can do this thing. They're excited about this. So all of a sudden, poof, a star appears. And the Magi are saying, all we need is a new king. Poof, the star appears, and they are on their donkeys, or camels, or Corvettes. I don't care what you say they're in. But they're headed to find their new king because they want to control the world. It's not a bad thing, right? Well, that is a bad thing, but that's what their motivation is. And so, you want to know why the king of the Jews, Herod, was agitated? He was scared to death. That he knew that these powerful people over here, these king selectors, came to his land and said, who's the next king? We're picking the next king. We've seen his star. It's only a matter of time. Where's the king? And so he knew that not only was he dealing with this power over here, but he was representing a piece for Rome, that if he lost it, and they actually got a powerful king, all of Rome was in trouble. Now we read this and we think, well, he probably just strolled into town with the three kings, right? That's not how they rolled. They rolled with a crew. I mean, they rolled heavy. They rolled with robes. They showed their power. They were powerful in the east, and they showed it. And so when they went somewhere, they showed their power. And so he looks out his window, and he doesn't see three older dudes with beards with some frankincense and myrrh. He sees the threat of an army. And he was terrified. Was he a bad man? Yeah, history tells us. Without question, he was a bad man. But he was terrified. And sometimes when you're terrified, you make decisions that aren't the best. Okay, so not to give him any due, but he was terrified and he acted accordingly. So, having said all of this, what in the world does that have to do with us? I love the history part, okay? But if that doesn't convert to making a difference in our life, what's the point? We got to the trunk of the trunk of the tree, and the tree said God was on the move from here to here, and guess what? He showed up at Christmas. He showed up, and the King was born. The important thing is to listen. The anticipation. You know something's going to come out of my mouth. The King is born. Anticipate. Right? How do we anticipate it? Listen. How many of you have played hide and go seek at some point in your life? Whew. We got most of us, okay? What's the secret to being a good hide and go seek, being it person? I don't know if is that what it means. When you're it, what does it mean? What's the secret? Listen, right? I remember nieces and nephews coming and visiting when the last church we were at Calvary, and it's a church, and it's a great church to play hide and go seek, and it's all on one level, and you can open it all up, and you can hear everything from one side all the way to the other. And I used to catch them like that, and finally they figured out that it wasn't, they thought I was cheating with my eyes, and so they would hide and look and make sure that I wasn't cheating with watching where they were hiding. And so finally they made me go into my office and turn the music up loud and shut the door. And that's how, because they figured out the secret that all you have to do to be a good at hide and go seek is to listen. Well, I think that's what Advent's asking us to do, is listen. The Magi were open to listening. They wanted a king. So where did they go? They went back to their scrolls that Daniel had given them. And they started reading. So what's this king going to look like? We need a king. What's this going to be? Let's listen. Let's listen. And so this Advent season, I guess my challenge to you would be, listen. What is God up to in your life? That's number one. What is God up to? You can write, in my life, number one. So I would challenge you in this Advent season to seriously ask yourself these questions in your quiet time. Make the decision to have a quiet time first of all. In this Advent season, what are you anticipating? Are you anticipating, family times and parties and presents and all this stuff that wears us out and we're busy? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the programs and all that sort of stuff. I enjoy it too. But in this Advent season, can we quiet our hearts and listen and ask ourselves, what is God up to in my life? Is he asking you to slow down? Is he asking you to change jobs? Is he asking you to speed up? Is he asking you to take action on something? Who knows? I don't know. That's between you and God. But this Advent season, I want you to anticipate, what is God up to in my life? What is he calling you to? Because he will speak. Just like he did to the wise men. I would ask that this New Hope family, that you would ask, God, what are you up to in our New Hope family? This Advent season, there's changes that are coming. I mean, change is going to happen, right? Change always happens. If you run from change, then you're in trouble. Change happens. So are we going to embrace change? Well, what is God up to, and what's that mean for our New Hope family? It means some of our New Hope family are moving to Colorado, right? We're going to miss you guys. We love you, and thank you for worshiping with us when you're here, right? But change happens. It stinks sometimes, but it's usually, change happens. So what is God up to in my life? What is God up to in New Hope? That may be one word. I capitalized the L. Everybody understand that? Okay. Siouxland. What is God up to in Siouxland? If you will seek and listen to God through your quiet time, whether that's just spending time alone with God in prayer, in His Word, seeking these times through conversation, through Wednesday nights, through craft nights, through walking down the middle of the mall, and all of a sudden you hear, "Oh, come all ye faithful," and all of a sudden, boom, you've decided, I'm going to seminary because I'm going into full-time ministry, because that's what He's asked me to do. He says, "Come all ye faithful." I don't think that's going to be your story, but it is a story, and it happened, and who knows what God is calling you to. One thing you can do in this is to go on the Right Now Media thing that we sent out. And if you aren't on that, get on our distribution list and you'll get an invite to the Right Now Media video thing. Because there's a great series right on the front page that talks about hearing whispers from God. It's a series from Bill Hybels, and it's awesome. Hearing whispers from God. What is God up to in my life? One ear towards heaven, one ear on earth. What is God up to in my life? What is He up to in New Hope? And what is He up to in Siouxland? This Advent season, don't waste it doing the same old thing that we always do. There's nothing wrong with time together with family, but if you ask these questions right, your time with family will be richer. There's nothing wrong with office parties, but if you ask these questions right, your office parties will be richer. There's nothing wrong with programs, but if you ask these questions right, your programs are going to be richer. This Advent season, please do like the wise men and listen, because God is speaking. Let's pray.